The British took a Western view of Palestine. To them, it was the Holy Land. It was seen in much the same way as by this early silent film made by Edison for an American audience.
You felt you were very much part of the original Palestine, that you might find Rebecca at the well or the woman of Samaria coming out from Sychar.
It was very biblical and very beautiful.
You had that feeling that the Holy Land was still holy.
Certainly most British were very devoted to Palestine. Interesting people, interesting problems, if some insoluble, and one felt a certain dedication. It's always historical and religious associations and that sort of thing.
There I was in one of the most primitive parts, more or less God Almighty, and it went to my head. It was the white man's burden.
I think perhaps I rather underestimated the ability of the people to govern themselves in those days, but that was probably a characteristic of the empire as a whole. But one definitely had, I think, a sense of mission, and that's why one went into it rather than into some other walk of life.
The British imperial duty was good government, sound justice, economic development. The country prepared for Western democracy. The Jews saw Palestine differently.
It was a desert land, devastated by hundreds of years of neglect. The herds of goats and sheep destroyed all the growth. All the trees were fuel for the roving Bedouins. Very little cultivation. Swamps, endemic diseases, malaria, many others. Very small townlets, little small harbors, jetties for the export mostly of metals and this kind of things.
To the Jews, Palestine was a land to be redeemed, a land promised them by God. In exile for 2,000 years, it remained their religious home. Persecution, particularly in Eastern Europe, had hardened their resolve to return to the one place where they felt they could live freely, as Jews. 100,000 came to Palestine in the 1920s. Financed by Jews throughout the world, they systematically bought land and founded settlements. Jews would be farmers again, but the land was to be redeemed by Jewish hands alone. Arab labor was excluded. The Arabs' vision of Palestine was different again.
Idyllic, I would have thought. From the social point of view, it was a well-integrated society. We had no social problem. Economically, we weren't very developed, if you want. But the Jaffa orange was marketed and well known before Jewish immigration began. The Hebron grapes have been known for centuries. The olives of the mountainous region in Palestine have always been there. And as I say, it was a simple life, not very complicated, but it was a good life.
Nearly all the Arabs were settled in towns or villages. Most were farmers. They saw Jewish immigration as a threat to the land they had farmed for centuries. From the start, they had objected. Violence had broken out in 1929. The flashpoint, religion. Arabs attacked and killed 133 Jews. It was the end of any real hope for a peaceful solution. The Arabs rebelled in the 30s, the Jews in the 40s. (1933) was an ominous year. October, Jaffa, an Arab demonstration against Jewish immigration was confronted by armed British police and degenerated into a riot. Tel Aviv, the same month, the Jews demonstrated for exactly the opposite reason, demanding more Jewish immigration. Both demonstrations were directed at the British. Berlin, February 1933. Hitler had come to power. The Jews of Eastern Europe had always been persecuted. The German Jews had not. But under Hitler, anti-Semitism was to become institutionalized, enshrined in the laws of the state. Their businesses were boycotted. They were banned from holding important jobs, blamed for Germany's economic ills. Jews were no longer free in Germany or safe.
The Jews were attacked, personally, physically. In the press, there were articles and so on against the Jews. There were always feeling against Jews, and I think if living for freedom and peace, you must go to Palestine.
Everywhere where we have been refugees and people who weren't wanted, and here it's the first time that somebody said welcome and home to me.
I didn't think about anything else than coming to Israel and settle here and participate in building my own country, which was promised to us by God and by the English people.